Just a moment.
There are some games that stick in your memory purely because of how they look, and it's usually not the ones that strive to be the most realistic or have the highest graphical fidelity. I could watch minutes of gameplay for a Call of Duty or Battlefield game and not be able to identify it. But I could see a random screenshot of a game like Viewtiful Joe, Superhot, Limbo, Star Fox, or Mad World and recognize it instantly. Another more obscure game that fits this mold for me is The Cat Lady, the second release from Harvester Games, a Polish studio that focuses on story-driven horror adventure titles. I originally planned to make a video about this about 8 years ago, and it got lost in the shuffle. So, I don't know what to say except, oops. You take on the role of Susan Ashworth, a deeply miserable lover of cats who commits that word YouTube would flag my video for saying, by swallowing a few dozen sleeping pills, only to be met between the worlds of the living and the dead by someone calling herself the Queen of Maggots. She makes Susan immortal and won't let her die until she helps eliminate 5 evil people in the world of the living known as parasites, who are each their own separate breeds of disgusting human beings. There's obviously something else going on beneath this plot thread, as in order to come back from being killed, Susan sometimes has to make a sacrifice of soul, which involves snuffing the will to live from a random someone, and the body count adds up fairly quickly. The entire game is controlled with only a few keys, namely the arrow keys and sometimes enter. One of my gripes with some adventure games is key items or interactables blending into the background, but it's easy to tell what can be interacted with thanks to the prompts that appear when Susan is close to them. That doesn't necessarily mean the game is easy, though. Susan isn't exactly physically imposing and can be overpowered easily. While not exceptionally long and not loaded with instant death traps, and it's hard to have those in a game where the player character is effectively immortal, the puzzles are abstract enough in their solutions that it will take time and exploration to figure them out, with some requiring multiple items set up in multiple locations, as well as intentionally dying to either revive in another location or trick the parasites into having a false sense of security. And yes, there is a point where Susan has to rely on one of her cats. The Cat Lady's art style, with its sparse use of color, mixing of hand-drawn and realistic elements, and abstract visuals, mixed with a soundtrack that ranges from experimental to noir to what sounds like an Evanescence practice session, creates environments ranging from depressing to oppressing to outright bizarre. While very little about the game actually scared me, it's hard not to have some of the game's imagery stick with you or make you squirm a bit, particularly when you start seeing the inhumane things the parasites are capable of. That said, it does sometimes break immersion to see elements blur or otherwise drop in quality, such as when Susan turns her head to the side, or when characters change from talking animations to oscillating back and forth like they're in an old Newgrounds Flash animation. The inspirations for this game are pretty apparent, particularly in the chapter involving 2 parasites in a mansion. A mansion with 2 maniacs in it. Yeah, this whole section is a giant reference to Maniac Mansion, from the level layout, to some of the puzzles, to the design of the parasites themselves. And you know what? I'm all for it. A good portion of the game is spent in dialogue trees and watching Susan interact with various people. The game takes place in the mid-2000s, and it certainly entrenches itself in that time period with some of the references it makes.
Are you a part of that emo subculture?
Please don't say that word ever again.
What did you say it was called again?
For the 3rd time. Social network. Why is it so difficult to remember?
I just find the whole idea really stupid.
But as for the overarching story, the game does well to not reveal its hand too quickly. Susan's past, the pasts of those around her, and the parasites come and go at a steady pace. Only during a couple instances with Susan at home did I think things were starting to drag. But that's also because I insisted on triggering as much dialogue as possible to learn more about everyone and everything. Sometimes it seems like different answers will yield different results, but aside from the ending, There's no branching off into different directions plot-wise. Given the amount of dialogue, there's tons of voice work going on in The Cat Lady, and the acting varies from alright to... it exists. The bulk of the voice work in this game was done for free from whoever the developers could find. And not only did they all have different microphones and wildly different audio quality, but it's pretty easy to tell when lines were recorded in different sessions, as the audio sometimes sounds completely different between back-to-back lines of dialogue. It's yet another element that makes the game's presentation rough around the edges.
I was trying to avoid all the stupid questions. I didn't know what else to say.
You're not supposed to get out. We must stay here. Do what they say. Take pills they give us.
One of my favorite performances was that of the Pest Control Man, a stupid but no less dangerous parasite. In fact, he sounded really familiar, and for good reason. He's voiced by David Firth, the guy behind Salad Fingers, Socks, The Milkman, and several other animations from the mid-2000s onward. He also voices the Pest Control Man's wife, Gladys. Given that Susan gets her face scarred up at one point in the game, I'm inclined to think she's the burnt face woman to complement David Firth's burnt face man.
Take that, crime, you shit!
The Cat Lady is a rough, sobering, but nevertheless engaging experience. While parts of it have certainly shown their age over the years, I still find it worth playing in spite of them. It's $11 on Steam, but I've seen it go on sale quite a few times, and it's also discounted as part of a trilogy of games called The Devil Came Through Here, which I really need to finish as I haven't gotten to Lorelei yet. Hopefully it doesn't take me another 8 years to get to that.
Well, what did you expect? Life's a real fucker sometimes.